I leaned back in my leather chair, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls of my office. Morning sunlight glittered against steel and glass towers, and for a moment, I allowed myself the smallest smile. My name, Emily Carter, CEO, gleamed in gold on the frosted glass of my door. Some days, I still couldn't believe it. Other days, it felt like destiny. The silk of my blouse whispered as I adjusted my sleeves, the faint scent of jasmine perfume clinging to my skin. My phone buzzed across the mahogany desk, the sound sharp in the stillness. I reached for it lazily, sipping my coffee, until I saw the sender's name. Michael Davis. The man who once told me I was too emotional for leadership. The same man who, with a smirk, stripped me of my job title years ago, handing it to someone else as if I were disposable. My stomach tightened, a ghost of the old wound stirring inside me. His email was short, polite, almost desperate. Emily, I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss opportunities. Please let me know when you're available. I let the words sink in, my manicured nail tapping lightly against the screen. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once silenced me now wanted to sit across my desk, in my office, on my terms. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk, staring at the skyline. My voice, steady, calm, but tinged with fire, rose softly in my own head. They took my job title once, but today, I run the company. I still remember the day as if it were carved into my skin. The conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and stale air conditioning. I was 26, fresh-faced, armed with ideas and the kind of relentless energy only someone hungry for success carries. I had worked on that project for weeks, spreadsheets, presentations, midnight emails. I knew every figure, every angle, every possible question. But none of that mattered. Effective immediately, Michael announced, his voice smooth and careless. Daniel will be taking over the role of project manager. Emily, you'll support him as an associate. You're still valuable here. Valuable. As if I were some trinket left on a shelf. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, heat flooding behind my ears. My throat tightened until it ached, and my hands shook beneath the glossy oak table. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral, but inside, I was screaming. This was my project, my work, my chance. And he had handed it away to someone who barely knew the details. Daniel, polite, awkward, gave me a sympathetic glance, but didn't refuse. Why would he? Power was being gift-wrapped for him. After the meeting, I locked myself in the restroom. My reflection stared back at me, red eyes, clenched jaw, lipstick smudged at the corner. For the first time in my career, I felt small, disposable. That night, I drove to my grandmother's house. She was the one person I knew would understand. Sitting at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped porcelain mug, she listened quietly as I poured out the humiliation, the anger, the ache. When I was done, she reached across the table and placed a pen in my palm, an old fountain pen, silver and worn. Emily, she said softly, her voice steady, never let anyone else write your story. They can take titles, they can take credit, but they can't take you. Remember that. I held the pen like it was a sword. The next morning, I walked into that office with my head high. I didn't fight Michael, not then. I didn't argue. I simply nodded, sat at my desk, and quietly began planning. Not for another job. Not for another title. For my independence. That was the day I stopped being afraid of losing things. Because I knew one truth. If I had built it once, I could build it again. Bigger, stronger, untouchable. Leaving that company wasn't easy. My salary paid for my small apartment, my student loans, and the second-hand car that broke down at least once a month. But every time I looked at my grandmother's pen resting on my nightstand, I remembered her words. Don't let them write your story. I started small. A side hustle, consulting for small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. I'd sit at my tiny kitchen table with my laptop, coffee gone cold beside me, typing until the screen blurred. I learned to design logos, write copy, draft contracts. I wasn't just building a resume. I was building resilience. The first time I landed a paying client, a local bakery in Brooklyn, I nearly cried. Their owner, a woman named Sandra, hugged me at the end of our first meeting. "You actually listened," she said. "You care. That's rare." Her words lit a spark inside me. Maybe I wasn't just good at this. Maybe I was meant for this. Still, the journey was brutal. There were nights I fell asleep at my desk, my mascara smudged across my cheeks. Days when I doubted myself, when rejection emails stacked in my inbox like bricks on my chest. But each no taught me something, sharpened me, made me hungrier. And then came Linda Harper. Linda was a powerhouse, one of those women who walked into a room and everyone adjusted their posture. She had built her own empire in tech, and when I nervously pitched my services to her at a networking event, she didn't laugh. She studied me. "You've got grit," she said. "That's rarer than talent. I'll give you a chance." Working under Linda was like being thrown into fire, terrifying, exhausting, but transformative. She didn't coddle me. She pushed me, demanded more, but she also believed in me. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. My small wins started stacking. My first $10,000 client. My first real office, just a rented desk in a shared workspace, but it felt like a palace. My first hire, a college intern who believed in my vision as much as I did. On social media, though, I stayed quiet. To my old colleagues, I was doing freelance. To my family, I simply said I was managing. I didn't post pictures of late-night strategy sessions or deals signed over champagne. I wanted my success to grow in silence, without the weight of anyone else's expectations. But inside, I was no longer the girl who cried in the office restroom. I was the woman building her own walls, her own ceiling, her own sky. By the time my company hit its first million in revenue, I realized something shocking. I didn't need their titles. I was creating my own. And yet I never forgot that conference room. The smirk on Michael's face. The sting of being dismissed. That memory became my fuel, burning quietly, pushing me forward every single day. Because deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. The email from Michael didn't sit quietly in my inbox for long. Within days, his assistant had scheduled a meeting. He wanted to discuss collaboration. Collaboration. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. But I said yes. Not because I needed him, but because a part of me wanted him to see what he had once overlooked. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early. My office, my kingdom, gleamed. The glass walls sparkled under the sun. A fresh bouquet of lilies stood on the corner table, their fragrance subtle but unmistakable. My grandmother's pen rested neatly beside my notebook, just where I could see it. A quiet reminder of how far I had come. At exactly 10, the receptionist buzzed me. "Emily, Michael Davis and his team are here." I stood, smoothed my silk blouse, adjusted my pearl earrings. When they walked in, I didn't rush to greet them. I let them enter my world, step into the silence of my success. Michael's eyes darted around the office, confusion flickering. The walls were lined with framed awards, photos with industry leaders, a painting I'd bought from a gallery downtown. My name, Emily Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Strategies, was etched in polished steel behind my desk. He blinked. This is yours." I tilted my head, hiding a smile. "Yes. Please have a seat." They sat, stiff in their suits, shifting uncomfortably on the leather chairs. I took my time, pouring water into crystal glasses, sliding them across the table. The power dynamic had flipped so completely it almost made me laugh. "So," I said smoothly, "you wanted to discuss opportunities?" Michael cleared his throat. "Yes. Our firm has been struggling. We've lost a few major accounts. We were hoping to partner with your agency. Your reputation is impressive." Your reputation. The irony nearly knocked the breath out of me. Years ago, this man had reduced me to an associate, telling me leadership wasn't my lane. Now he sat across from me, humbled, needing what I had built. I let the silence stretch, watching him fidget. Then I leaned forward, folding my hands on the desk. Do you remember that meeting years ago, Michael?
My voice was calm, measured.
When you handed my project, my work, to Daniel and told me I was ready? Color drained from his face. Emily, I raised a hand. It's not about apologies. I just want you to understand something. You took my title,
But you didn't take me.
and that's the difference between people who build and people who take credit. The room went still. One of his colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Another looked down at the table, shame etched on his face. Finally, I smiled. Not cruelly, not vindicatively, just knowingly. Michael, I don't just run an agency. I own this company. Every decision here begins and ends with me. So if you want to work together, understand this. You'll be walking into my house. On my terms. The words landed like thunder. I could see the disbelief in their eyes, the slow dawning realization of who I had become. Michael swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. Of course. We respect that. For the first time in years, I felt the scales balance. The girl who once cried in a restroom stall had become the woman commanding the room. And it wasn't revenge that warmed me. It was clarity. Power wasn't in the title he once stripped away. Power was in standing tall, unshaken, in the truth of who I had always been. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. For a moment, I let the silence breathe, watched the men across from me fidget in their seats. You see, I began slowly. I don't believe in burning bridges. But I also don't believe in rebuilding them for people who once set them on fire. Michael shifted, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Emily, we were young and I cut him off gently. Michael, let's not pretend this was about age.
It was about ego.
You didn't see me because you didn't want to. And now, here we are. His colleagues looked down, embarrassed. I softened my tone, not out of pity, but because I had grown past bitterness. Here's how this will work if we move forward. My company will consider your proposal, but under strict conditions. I ticked them off on my fingers, each word deliberate. First, respect. My team will not be talked over, dismissed, or undermined. You treat them as equals or there's no deal. Second, transparency. No hidden agendas, no shady shortcuts. We build with integrity here. Third, growth. If you work with me, you invest in training women and minorities in leadership. You open doors that you once shut. I let my hand fall back to the desk, the weight of my grandmother's pen glinting in the corner of my vision. Michael's jaw tightened. That's a lot to ask. I smiled faintly. No, Michael. It's the bare minimum. If you want to survive in this industry, if you want access to what I've built, you'll have to evolve. If not, there are plenty of others knocking on my door. The room went quiet again. His colleagues exchanged glances, clearly torn between pride and survival. Finally, one of them, a younger man named Robert, spoke up. She's right. We do need to change. That broke the tension. Michael let out a slow breath, nodding reluctantly. All right, we'll do it your way. I studied him, searching for sincerity. Maybe he would change, maybe he wouldn't. But one thing was certain. I was no longer the one waiting for approval. I was the one setting terms. And it wasn't just with them. That night, when my mother called asking if I could help your brother get a job, I told her the same thing. I'll help him if he's ready to work for it. No shortcuts. No handouts. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. But I wasn't bending to old patterns anymore. Because real power isn't about revenge. It's about rewriting the rules, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. And if Michael and his firm wanted a seat at my table, they would sit under those rules. Or not at all. Weeks passed after that meeting, and slowly, I began to notice the changes. Michael's firm kept their word, at least for now. They sent younger associates, women and men alike, to shadow my team and learn. They listened instead of interrupting. They asked questions instead of dismissing. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was something. At home, my brother finally swallowed his pride and started working a steady job. My mother, though still hesitant to fully understand the woman I had become, had stopped asking when I would settle down. Instead, she bragged to her friends that her daughter ran her own business. Progress in its own way. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I sat alone in my office. The city lights glimmered against the glass like stars scattered across the skyline. My desk was cluttered with contracts and notes, but my eyes fell on just one thing: my grandmother's pen. I picked it up, running my thumb over the worn silver. It felt heavier than it used to, or maybe I was finally carrying it the way she had intended, not as a reminder of what I lost, but as proof of what I had built. Her words echoed softly in my memory: "Never let anyone else write your story." I smiled, whispering into the stillness, "I didn't, Grandma. I wrote every word myself." Leaning back in my chair, I allowed myself a rare moment of stillness. My journey had been full of pain, betrayal, and nights that nearly broke me. But it had also been filled with growth, resilience, and victories that were mine alone. They had taken my job title once, a meaningless string of words on a business card. But what I had now was more than a title.
It was ownership.
It was respect. It was freedom. And as I looked out at the skyline, my city, my company, my story, I knew exactly how to end it. I set the pen down, straightened in my chair, and let the final line rise steady and strong, as if the whole world were listening. They took my job title, but in the end, I took the company.